to this week's #Finance Friday. And as we start out the month of June, we are talking all about budgeting, because budgeting is really important, right? And we've been speaking a little bit about burnout the last month, and was maybe looking at you in a bit more detail as the entrepreneur. But now let's actually get into dealing with your company and understanding when your company potentially gets into burnout, right? And budgeting is a good way of making sure that that does not happen. Have you ever maybe caught yourself saying things like, in hindsight, I should have, or I wish I knew this was going to happen, so I could have planned for this. We would love to see into the future sometimes so that we can prepare for the unpreparable, right? And the things that we can't actually anticipate. And we do actually have a way of doing that, and it's called budgeting. Now, I'm sure you are familiar with this term, but budgeting requires us to look so far ahead into the future that you could potentially call a budget a planned outcome of the future. And because when we build a budget, we are able to understand the bigger picture of what is to come and be able to prepare ourselves for the challenges that we might foresee. So let's get into a bit of the theoretical component of what a budget actually is. And as I said, you might already be familiar with this, but really a budget is essentially a plan for our finances. It is used to estimate our business's revenue and meet our objectives and make sure that we have enough money in our back pockets to be able to manage and meet our future projections. Now, there are a few things that our budget needs to be able to do well in order to make sure that it is working well. So firstly, it needs to be detailed and realistic. Honestly, we need to be realistic. You simply need to work out what you are likely to earn and to spend and make sure that nothing is left out. It's really as simple as that. But we need to take into account both short-term as well as long-term plans. And we need to remember that our budget is always going to be subject to change. It is supposed to be a living, breathing document that should be reviewed on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, and even be adjusted according to how the changes are happening in your business. So you might be like, okay, well, I know what a budget is, and I know I should be doing budgeting, but I'm not actually sure why I should be budgeting. Well, if you think about it, structured planning helps us to make a massive difference in the growth of our business. It's going to help us to concentrate our resources on improving our profits, as well as reducing costs and increasing our return on investment. But if we don't know what we're planning for, we can't attach costs to it, and we need to look at both of those to be able to make sure that we are meeting our expectations. And budgeting really is the most effective way to be able to control our cash flow, allowing us to invest in new opportunities at the right time. Because investing, though it might be in the right thing, but at the wrong time, is still the wrong thing to do, right? So budget helps us to put those things together. And really, at the end of the day, your budget is really the most critical tool to be able to make sure that you are staying in control of your expenditure. Your budget can serve as many things, okay? It serves a lot of purposes. It can serve as an indicator of costs and revenues linked to each of our activities. And it can be a way of providing information and supporting our managerial decisions throughout the year, and not just in stops and starts, right? And also it's a way of monitoring and controlling the business as a whole, particularly if you're going to be analyzing your differences between actual and budget. Because just having a budget on its own doesn't actually help us. We have to compare it to something. So that is where your actuals come in, and you need to actually try and match those. And for small businesses, it's often a case where unrealistic or poorly managed budgets become a problem, and that is often the cause for closure in a lot of businesses. So there are a lot of reasons why we should be budgeting, but in case we have not driven this home yet, let's just have a look quickly at a couple of the benefits of budgeting. So other than making sure that you are living in a stress-free environment and preventing burnout of you as the entrepreneur, it also, as I said, helps to prevent the burnout in the business. And it has a lot of benefits over and above just managing your money effectively. It helps you to be able to see ahead of time what resources you might need for certain projects, whether it's based on people or equipment or just cash resources. And it helps you to show how your business has been performing in the past and helps you to see how you could potentially improve on those, identify areas for concern, and be able to improve on that going forward. And it also forms a plan to help you to meet the objectives that you have set out for your business. So think about those KPIs and how your budget is helping you to be able to meet those. Okay. It also helps to improve your decision making. If you think about it, in order to make decisions about any facet of your business, you have to know how much money is required to make those things happen. Okay, it helps you to increase your staff motivation. It helps to attract investors. Anytime that you have to try and apply for funding, you need to put some sort of plan together. Okay, and that is often in the form of a budget. It can also help you to obtain debt financing to be able to prove how you're going to use that money and how you're going to be able to repay that money in the future. And then lastly, it helps you for your tax preparation. Those provisional tax payments that you have to do, it has to be based on some sort of forecast, right? And that's where your budget comes in. So there are a lot of reasons why we should budget, and there are a lot of benefits to budgeting. But at UPvisor, we always link it back to productivity and profitability, right? So let's have a look at that quickly. Hopefully the link between profitability and budgeting is a relatively straightforward one for you to see. But really your business's profitability depends on the future projections of your income and expenditure. So it helps us to project the expenses and revenue for the future, as well as to take corrective action where it's required. So think about this for a moment. We can use our budget to maximize our profits, right? We can also use it to be able to make future projections concerning expenses and the funds that need to be earmarked for the future. And then it helps us to keep an eye on those expenses that might be fluctuating, right? And identify areas where some sort of capital contribution is going to help us to yield higher returns. And lastly, again, coming back to using it to manage and control our expenses. So reduce those expenses and increase the income, because at the end of the day, that is going to help drive your profitability. So now that you understand why we need to budget, and hopefully the message has come across loud and clear that you need to budget, you might start to wonder how to do this correctly. So there are a couple of questions that you can ask yourself as you start out. Think about, what are the projected sales for your budget period? And your budget period could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, longer than that, okay? And then what are the direct costs associated to each of those sales? What are the costs incurring? What are those costs that you're going to incur to produce the products that you're making, to advertise them, to market them? All of those need to be taken into account. And then finally, look, what are the costs, the fixed costs or the overheads that you're going to incur in the business? And preferably start breaking those up into different types. If you have had your business for a number of years, or maybe even just for a single year, you can use last year's figures to help estimate what the future budget should look like. But I want to caution you about using last year's figures and just applying inflation. There are often costs that we incur last year, which could be a once-off, or there could be additional costs coming in this year that might not have been present last year. So really, if you are using last year's figures as a base, make sure that this year's figures are still going to be relevant and that any missing items have been included. And please remember, your budget should include not just your costs and your revenues, it should also, very importantly, be looking at your cash flow. So your cash flow can include your capital expenses that you need to incur, your debtor payment terms, your creditor payment terms, all of those sort of things also need to be included. Often businesses will stop at merely looking at a profitability budget and not actually have a look at your cash flow budget as well. Now, changing your planning process to include a budget does not have to be difficult. Here are some 8 steps that you can follow in this process. Firstly, determine how much of your current savings you're willing to spend to put all of your plans into action. Secondly, determine your tolerance for financial risk. In other words, how much debt are you willing to incur to make sure that those plans can become a reality? Number 3, determine how much of your monthly cash flow, like your operational cash flow, you can put towards your projects. And fourthly, follow your regular planning processes on an annual or quarterly basis, depending on how you're doing it at the moment. And then number 5, for each project that you're doing, estimate how much money is needed to complete this project. Number 6, compare the cost of completing each project to what you have calculated in number 1, 2, and 3, okay, based on what is available. And bear in mind that this total project cost should not exceed what you are saying that you have available. And number 7, adjust the size and the timing of your project so that the costs that you are estimating fit within the boundaries of what you have available. And then finally, number 8, convert your projects into task lists that help you to move your project forward at a pace that fits within the limits that you have set for yourself. And then finally, I just want to remind you of a few things that you need to take into account as you are budgeting. Firstly, make sure you are paying yourself and you are putting money aside for tax. Okay, really, really important. If you are not able to pay yourself, you are not yet running a highly successful business in any case. Okay, so that is very important. Secondly, make sure you are putting time aside for budgeting. If you don't plan your time, maybe put it into your calendar on a regular basis to make sure that you are either setting your budget or reviewing that budget. It's going to be really difficult to track with it. And make sure that your budget is realistic. Don't underestimate the cost of certain things in your business. Often it's a case of how long is a piece of string? It can be really expensive, but just be realistic. Is it actually going to be as little as you're estimating, or do you maybe need to build in a bit of a buffer there for yourself? And then make sure that you're involving the right people in your budgeting process. And finally, make sure you are reviewing your budget. There's no point in putting time aside to prepare this budget if you don't review it and don't use it. Okay. Otherwise, it's time spent for naught. Okay. So I hope that has sort of just stimulated your thought process in terms of the whole budget process. Okay. Just in terms of the importance thereof and how we go about doing it. But in our Unlocking Your Inner CFO courses that we were running last year, we did a specific session all about budgeting in your business and forecasting and how to do it and who to incorporate in this whole process. So if you would like to learn more and if you would like to get access to some templates that you can use in your business to make sure that that is working well for you, then make sure that you check out our social media pages where we'll be popping a little bit of information on about the promo for this month. So make sure that this month you are focusing on getting some budgeting done, especially because we are now sitting in the middle of the year. There's no time like the present to make sure that you're either catching up with doing your budget or otherwise reviewing the budget that you have done up until now. Next week, we are going to be chatting a bit about the tools that you can use to be able to budget. As you know, we love tools. So we will be chatting about that next week. So until then, I'll see you then. Bye.